The Black Hollow Witch Incident. October 1997, Vermont, USA. In the autumn of 1997, near the small, old town of Elders Hollow in Vermont, 4 college friends, Jessica, Emily, Sarah, and Rachel, set out for a short vacation. The place was famous for its breathtaking fall foliage, misty forests, and abandoned 19th-century houses. Emily's parents had recently bought an old cabin right on the edge of Black Hollow Forest, a place the townsfolk never entered after dark. Everyone in the town said the same thing: "Don't go there after sunset. She wakes up." One evening, Jessica convinced the others to explore the ruins of a burned-down church deep in the forest. Inside, they found strange markings carved into the stone floor, burnt candle wax in a circle, and words scrawled on the wall in what looked disturbingly like dried blood. "She feeds when the moon bleeds." That night, a strange whispering echoed outside their cabin. Sarah peeked through the window and saw a tall, hunched figure with glowing red eyes standing among the trees. Its hair was like twisted roots and its mouth stretched into a smile too wide to be human. At midnight, Jessica's scream tore through the cabin. The others rushed to her room. The floor was slick with blood, the window wide open, and Jessica was gone. The only trace left behind was her torn college hoodie, and a message clawed into the wall with sharp nails. "One by one, you'll join me." Emily's hands shook uncontrollably, and Rachel fought to stay calm. Sarah insisted they leave at first light, but the night was far from over. By the next evening, they tried to leave on foot, but a heavy fog swallowed the forest, making it impossible to find the road. Every path twisted back until they found themselves at the same burned church. As they stood there, the earth beneath them split open, and a skeletal hand, covered in black ritual markings, shot out and clamped around Sarah's ankle. From the ground rose the Black Hollow Witch, part rotting corpse, part living flesh, her red eyes burning with a hatred that felt ancient. With a horrific strength, she dragged Sarah screaming into the earth, the soil sealing shut as if nothing had happened. Emily and Rachel stood frozen, clutching Sarah's shoe, too shocked to move. On the third night, only Emily and Rachel remained. They headed toward an old radio tower at the forest's edge, hoping to catch a signal for help. But at the base of the tower lay dozens of human skulls and bones. Above, the blood moon bathed the clearing in crimson light. The witch appeared in a swirl of black smoke, lifting Emily into the air. The dark mist wrapped around her, muffling her screams until she dissolved into ash that drifted to the ground. Rachel fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face, and shouted, "I'm not afraid of you." Fueled by rage, Rachel returned to the cabin, grabbing an old hunter's crossbow and wooden arrows. She marched back to the church ruins, where the witch stood in the middle of a burning candle circle, chanting in some unholy tongue. The witch turned, releasing a scream so sharp the shattered glass from the old windows rained to the floor. The fight that followed was brutal. Arrows flew, a hunting knife slashed, and bottles of fire exploded across the stone floor. But the witch's black magic was too strong. A blast of shadow threw Rachel hard against the wall. Just as the witch's ritual neared completion, Rachel lit her last arrow in the flames and drove it deep into the witch's chest. The creature's scream shook the forest, and her body disintegrated into a cloud of ash that the wind carried away. Since October 1997, Black Hollow Forest has remained abandoned. Rachel is still alive, but she says she never looks into a mirror at night, because sometimes, staring back at her, she sees those same red eyes. If you want, I can rework this into a more cinematic, ultra-terrifying version with vivid sensory detail, making it feel like a horror movie you can see, hear, and smell. While reading, that would make it far more chilling. The Lake Harlow incident. It was the summer of 1998, when a chilling event at Crystal Harlow Lake, nestled deep in the mountains of Montana, shook the entire region. On the edge of the serene lake stood a small wooden cabin, where 4 friends, Hannah, Chloe, Madison, and Ava, had come to spend their vacation. By day, the lake looked like paradise. Blue waters, green mountains, and the golden glow of sunset. But locals often told an old tale. Across the lake, there was a decaying fishing shack where a woman named Eleanor Voss had mysteriously disappeared. Her body was never found, and people whispered that she had become the Lake Harlow witch. The girls laughed off the story, thinking it was just a small-town legend. On the first night, a light mist rolled over the lake. Around midnight, Hannah heard the sound of water splashing, as if someone was walking out of the lake. She opened the door and saw a tall, long-haired woman in the fog, her hair soaked, mud dripping from her clothes. In an instant, the figure was right in front of her, clutching Hannah's throat and slamming her to the ground. Her scream brought the others running, but the witch dragged Hannah to the lake shore and began tearing into her flesh. The water turned red with blood. The second night, Chloe's fear had deepened, but Madison insisted it might be an animal attack. They tried calling for help, but there was no signal. Late at night, droplets of water began hitting the window. Even though it wasn't raining, Chloe peered outside. The same burned, waterlogged face was pressed against the glass. The next moment, the door burst open and the witch stormed inside, grabbing Chloe by the hair and dragging her out. Ava and Madison screamed, but the witch slammed Chloe onto the ground again and again until the sound of bones snapping filled the air. Then she pulled Chloe into the lake, vanishing into the mist this time. Both survivors knew they were facing something inhuman. The third night, Ava and Madison tried to flee, but as evening fell, the fog grew so thick they couldn't see a single path. The faint light of the moon cast a silver glow over the still water. At midnight, the witch silently stepped into the cabin. Madison grabbed the knife and attacked, but the witch twisted her arm until it snapped. Throwing the blade away, she slammed Madison into the wall repeatedly, blood splattering across the floor. Moments later, Madison's screams went silent, leaving Ava. The fourth night, Ava decided to fight back. She gathered salt, crafted a wooden cross, and found an old harpoon in the cabin. The moonlight shimmered on the lake when the witch emerged from the fog. Ava threw salt into her face. Smoke hissed from her wet skin as the witch shrieked in rage. They clashed violently. The witch slammed Ava to the floor, while Ava struck back with the harpoon. Finally, with every ounce of strength, Ava drove the harpoon through the witch's throat. The witch's screams shattered the stillness of the lake before her body dissolved like water, flowing back into the depths. When morning came, Ava sat alone by the lake shore. The fog had lifted, the water was calm, but the fear still clung to her eyes. To this day, the people of Crystal Harlow Lake never go near the shore at night, because they say that in the moonlight, a wet, pale face still appears in the mist. The Witch of Ravenwood Forest. Incident, October 1997, Oregon, USA. In the cold autumn nights of Oregon, there was always a chilling tale whispered about Ravenwood Forest. It was said that in the 1800s, a woman named Abigail Crowhurst was accused of black magic and satanic rituals and was burned alive. Before dying, she cursed the entire town, swearing that her spirit would forever wander the forest and, on every full moon, she would rise from her grave to feast on human flesh. In October 1997, 4 college friends, Emma, Rachel, Samantha, and Chloe, set out on a Halloween adventure trip. They all lived together in a small apartment in Portland and had recently become obsessed with nature photography. They had heard that Ravenwood Forest in the fall had breathtaking scenery under the moonlight, and this curiosity drew them in. As the evening sun dipped below the horizon, they drove their Jeep to the edge of the forest, their boots crunched over golden leaves while a cool breeze carried them deeper inside. None of them realized it was the night of a full moon, the night when Abigail was said to return. By nightfall, an eerie silence fell over the forest. No crickets, no owls. Suddenly, a tall, shadowy woman in a tattered black gown appeared near their camp. Her eyes burned like red flames, and her hands were tipped with long, sharp nails. Rachel was the first to scream, but before anyone could react, Abigail waved her hand through the air. The ground trembled, and an unseen force lifted Rachel up and slammed her hard against the ground. Her screams echoed through the forest before abruptly falling silent. Abigail crouched over her and began tearing at her flesh like an animal. The remaining three girls froze in terror, Emma's eyes flooding with tears, Chloe clutching Samantha's arm, unable to move. The next morning, they were terrified but couldn't find their way out of the forest. A thick fog surrounded them, and their GPS kept showing the same location, as if the forest itself refused to let them leave. That night, they huddled together, too surrounded to sleep. Abigail returned. Emerging slowly from the fog, she began chanting in a dark, guttural language. Suddenly, Samantha's body twisted unnaturally, as if her bones were breaking from the inside. Then she was flung violently to the ground over and over. The sound of her bones snapping was so sharp that Emma covered her ears. And Chloe's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. Abigail drank her blood and vanished once more into the fog. By the third day, only Emma and Chloe remained. They stayed awake through the night, trying to give each other courage. But as the sun set, the forest turned strange. The sky burned red, and the shadows of the trees stretched long and ominous. Close to midnight, Chloe spotted what she thought was a light, perhaps a way out, but it was only the glow of Abigail's eyes. The witch grabbed Chloe by the hair, lifting her into the air before slamming her into the ground. Emma screamed and ran toward her, but one look at Abigail froze her in place. Abigail tore open Chloe's chest, pulled out her heart, and devoured it raw. The image seared itself into Emma's mind forever. Now Emma was alone, but instead of succumbing to fear, she was consumed by rage. She remembered from her college occult studies course that to kill a witch, one must pierce her heart with a silver nail inside her coffin, along with black salt to bind the spirit. Determined, she searched, found Abigail's shattered resting place. As the final hour of the full moon approached, Abigail emerged from the mist, her lips curling into a wicked smile. This time, Emma was ready. She hurled black salt into the witch's face, breaking the spell's hold. Abigail shrieked, her scream splitting the night air. Emma drove the silver nail into her heart, and Abigail's body turned to ash. The fog began to fade, and the forest finally seemed to release its grip. Emma stumbled out of Ravenwood Forest and eventually reached the road, where a passing truck driver took her to a hospital. The memory of that night, and the sight of her friends being slaughtered, would haunt her for the rest of her life. Locals now call it the Ravenwood Massacre of 1997, and some say that on full moon nights, if you listen closely, you can still hear a woman's scream echoing through the trees. Perhaps Abigail's spirit still wanders, waiting for the next lost soul to enter her domain. The Witch of Hollow Creek Incident, November 2004, North Carolina, USA. In the mountains of North Carolina lay an old town, just beyond which ran a deep stream through the forest, known as Hollow Creek. Locals avoided the area, for there was a dark legend about a woman named Margaret Crow, a master of black magic in the 1890s, who was caught performing satanic rituals and drowned by the townsfolk in the creek. Before dying, she cursed the land, vowing that on the last full moon of autumn each century, she would rise again to tear apart anyone who dared to come near. In November 2004, 4 university friends, Jessica, Hannah, Brooke, and Megan, went on a post-Halloween weekend trip. Their plan was to hike, take mountain photos, and camp for a night near Hollow Creek. Jessica was the photography enthusiast. Hannah loved hiking. Brooke was fearless, and Megan was sensitive yet endlessly curious. By evening, they drove their SUV to the forest's edge. Autumn leaves swirled through the air, the creek shimmered in the moonlight, and a strange quiet hung in the cold breeze. None of them noticed that tonight was a full moon. The night began with laughter, but when the clock struck midnight, the forest changed. The wind stopped. Tree shadows grew. A mist began to rise from the creek. From the water, a woman emerged, soaked hair hanging over her face, pale rotting skin, eyes glowing red, and long, sharp nails. She whispered an incantation in an unrecognizable language, and the air seemed to grow heavy. Her gaze fell on Jessica first. In an instant, some unseen force lifted her into the air and slammed her to the ground with a violent crack. The sound of breaking bones filled the air as Margaret pounced on her. The other 3 froze, their bodies numb with terror. Unable to move, Margaret sank her teeth into Jessica's neck, drinking deeply before vanishing into the mist, leaving nothing but her lifeless body behind. The rest of the night, the 3 survivors clung to each other, sleepless and trembling. At dawn, they tried to leave in their SUV, but every road led them back to the same campsite. The GPS was stuck on one location, and their phones had no signal. As darkness returned, they knew she would come again. Just after midnight, Margaret emerged from the fog. Heading straight for Hannah, she traced a black circle in the air, and Hannah's body began twisting unnaturally, as if her bones were snapping from within. Megan screamed. Brooke grabbed the branch and swung at her, but the wood shattered mid-air as if caught by invisible hands. Margaret slammed Hannah to the ground, tore open her chest, ripped out her heart, and swallowed. Only Brooke and Megan remained. They spoke little, fear wrapping around them like a vice. The next night, with the moon casting its light over the creek, Brooke decided she would try to run when the witch came. But the moment Margaret emerged from the mist, she seized Brooke by the hair and flung her so high she crashed onto the sharp rocks by the water. Margaret descended on her, tearing flesh away in blood-soaked handfuls, while Megan could only scream. But inside Megan, fear gave way to rage. She remembered something her grandmother had once told her. To destroy an evil spirit, you must drive a silver nail into its heart and bind it with a handful of black salt. The next night, when Margaret rose again from the creek, Megan stood her ground. She pulled a pouch of black salt from her pocket and hurled it straight into Margaret's face. The witch's scream was so shrill the trees seemed to shudder. Seizing the moment, Megan pulled a silver nail from her backpack and drove it deep into Margaret's chest. The witch's body convulsed before dissolving into ash. The mist dispersing into the night, the creek cleared, and the suffocating silence broke. Megan walked through the forest until sunrise, eventually finding the road, where a passerby took her to the police station. To this day, locals in North Carolina claim that on the full moon of each century, the waters of Hollow Creek carry the distant scream of a woman. Perhaps Margaret Crow's spirit, still waiting to take revenge. The Witch of Black Hollow. Incident, October 2009, Vermont, USA. In the northern mountains of Vermont lay a secluded valley the locals called Black Hollow. In autumn, the place was breathtakingly beautiful. drawing photographers from miles away. But to the townsfolk, it was cursed. They told of a woman named Eleanor Grayson, a master of black magic and satanic rites in 1872, who was caught summoning dark forces. The villagers chained her and buried her alive in a dry well at the center of the valley. Before dying, she swore that every 10 years, on the last full moon of autumn, she would return to claim the descendants of those who imprisoned her. In October 2009, 4 university friends, Emily, Sarah, Lauren, and Kate, set off from New York on a road trip. Emily was the passionate photographer. Sarah was fearless and stubborn. Lauren was cheerful and full of jokes. And Kate was quiet but sharp-minded. Their plan was to capture Vermont's fall colors. At a small local cafe, someone half-jokingly warned them, "Don't go to Black Hollow. There's a spirit there." They laughed it off, but Sarah insisted they check it out. By afternoon, they drove their SUV deep into the valley. The road was lined with golden and crimson leaves. The crisp air carried the scent of pine, and the mountains cast long shadows. At dusk, they came upon an old wooden lodge, seemingly perfect for camping. Emily set up her tripod, Kate built a fire, and the others prepared food, unaware that the full moon hung bright overhead. At midnight, the wind died. A suffocating silence blanketed the hollow. From the depths of the old dry well, mist began to rise, and a tall, gaunt figure emerged. Her skin was torn and pale. Her eyes burned red, and her fingers ended in long, black nails. Eleanor's presence froze the blood in their veins. Without touching her, she lifted Emily into the air. In a heartbeat, she slammed her into the ground with a bone-cracking thud. Sarah lunged forward, but an invisible force hurled her back. Eleanor crouched and bit deep into Emily's neck. Drinking greedily, the others could only stare, paralyzed. When she vanished into the mist, only Emily's lifeless body remained. Sarah whispered, "We have to fight, or we're all going to die." The next morning, they tried to escape the valley, but every path looped back to the lodge. GPS and phones were useless. As night fell again, the mist returned. This time, Eleanor went straight for Lauren. Lauren grabbed the knife and tried to stab her, but the blade melted into black smoke before it could strike. Eleanor muttered an incantation in some foul tongue, and Lauren's body twisted as if her joints were breaking from within. The others heard the sickening snap of bones. Eleanor slammed her to the ground again and again, then tore her open, pulling out her heart and devouring it. Kate shut her eyes. Sarah's tears ran hot with rage and terror. On the third night, Sarah and Kate stayed awake. Sarah sharpening a thick branch into a sword. Eleanor's shadow emerged from the mist. Sarah charged and drove the spear into her abdomen, but her body was as hard as stone. Eleanor shattered the weapon in her hands, seized Sarah by the hair, and flung her to the ground. She ripped Sarah's chest open and ate her heart while Kate stood frozen, shaking, the world narrowing to the horror before her. But fear was slowly giving way to fury. Kate remembered a lecture from college. To kill a vengeful spirit, you must drive a silver nail into its heart and bind it with black salt. She spent the remaining hours of the night digging at the edge of the dry well. As the final hour of the full moon approached, Eleanor rose from the mist, her lips curled in a cruel smile. This time, Kate was ready. She hurled a handful of black salt into her face. Eleanor's scream ripped through the hollow, the trees trembling as if in pain. Kate pulled a silver nail from her pocket and drove it into the witch's heart with all her strength. Eleanor's body convulsed, the red glow in her eyes flickered, and she crumbled into ash. The mist dissolved, moonlight spread across the valley, and the crushing silence lifted. Kate walked until sunrise, eventually reaching the highway, where a passing driver took her to the police. To this day, the people of Vermont say that on the last full moon of autumn, If you stand quietly in Black Hollow, you can hear a woman's scream in the distance. Perhaps Eleanor Grayson's spirit, still waiting for the next full moon to rise.